And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. And you're listening to us on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and on Simul TV. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And let me see here. The X Chronicles newspaper for February, March is going to be available at xchroniclesnewspaper.com on Friday. And for all the broadcast listings that we have, once again, for the X Zone Broadcast Network, it's www.xzbn.net. Steve Behrman is my special guest this hour, X Zone Nation. He is an internationally known author, humorist, and workshop leader. For over 33 years, he has written and performed as Swami Beyondananda. Probably got that wrong. Right?
Beyondananda.
You couldn't have a Swami Smith, could you? Oh, no. Anyway, the Cosmic comic. Swami's comedy has been described as both comedy disguised as wisdom and wisdom disguised as comedy. Marianne Williamson has called him the Mark Twain of our generation. On the serious side, Steve has co-authored Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future, and A Way to Get There From Here with cellular biologist Bruce H. Lipton. Steve's radio show, Wikipolitiki, can be heard on Om Times Radio. And joining me now is Steve Behrman. And Steve, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure to be here and there.
And everywhere. Sounds like a Beatles song, doesn't it? Here, there, and everywhere.
Exactly.
Hey, listen, tell us about the creation of the Swami, and how did you get to his name, Beyondananda?
Beyondananda. Well, you know, it's funny. I got struck by enlightening during a brainstorm. I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was working on a funny paper for the other people I work with at the Department of Parks and Forestry in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this name flies into my head, Beyondananda. Now, those who have gone into the whole Swamidom recognize that Ananda means bliss. And a lot of the Swamis have Ananda after their names. There's Yogananda, Muktananda, Satchidananda, Kriyananda, and Ananda. And I heard the name Beyondananda, and it made me laugh. And so when I started a publication in Ann Arbor for the holistic community and so on, and recognized that people needed to poke fun at what they were doing in a gentle way, I came up with the character Swami Beyondananda, who became our mascot and the most popular feature in the paper.
So what does the Swami do?
Well, the Swami is a purveyor of what we call cosmic comic consciousness. Cosmic comic consciousness. And the main precept is it's a joke, laugh. And if you have that little bit of perspective on things that are going on, if you can create that degree of separation, it's a joke, laugh, then you begin to find the comedy, find the joke hidden in the picture, and you're also able to help uplift other people by committing random acts of playful comedy. So part of what I teach when I'm doing my teaching is how to do this. I have a upcoming teleclass called How to See Funny. But the Swami is mainly a wild character who shapeshifts ideas and concepts. And, you know, if you have the Swami on a little bit later, it'll give you a demonstration of it. But mainly, the idea behind the Swami is to poke fun at our human foibles, do it in a way that's funny, do it in a way that's heart-opening, and leave some insight, have an awakening in the wake of the laughter.
You know, we're living in very serious times here, Steve. How can comedy help us?
God help us. No, I mean, I think actually what comedy does two things. First of all, in these serious times that we're living in, I call them evolutionary times because we are in the process, if we survive, we're in the process of evolving from, as Swami would say, children of God to adults of good. And we're in this very awkward stage that he calls addled essence, because our essence has been addled by toxic beliefs and ruled by the lowest common denominator for the last 5,000 years. So what's happening is that all of these things that have been under the surface are coming up and coming out, and comedy is a great way to release the tension through laughter and also to create insight. Because comedy puts together things that don't normally belong together. And it's a way of dealing with the contradictions and the paradoxes. And evolution is something that takes us out of these the dueling dualities that we see. It's either this or that, and points us to a third way. And maybe people wonder, why is it that jokes always come in threes, like a minister, a priest, and a rabbi? So I'll give you an example. Minister, a priest, and a rabbi are discussing their legacy. How do they want to be remembered, and what do they want the eulogist to be saying when they're in their casket at their funeral? And the minister says, well, I want them to be saying he was a family man and a pillar of his community. The priest said, I want them to be saying he was a holy man and a leader of his flock. The rabbi says, I want them to be saying, look, I think he's breathing.
Okay.
So normally what happens is comedy points us in an unexpected direction and gives us a third pathway. And as you see, people are really, really stuck in their belief systems, in their entrenched beliefs, and creating trench warfare. Comedy is a way for us to help deconstruct obsolete, and a new word, obsolethal, which is obsolete and deadly, obsolete and obsolethal ideas, and do it in a way that creates laughter and insight.
Is comedy just an escape from reality?
I think reality is an escape from comedy. I look at it the other way. I think that actually I look at comedy, at least the kind of comedy that I do, as a radical embrace of reality. That in a certain regard, we do so many things to keep us away from seeing what's in front of us. George Carlin, who I greatly admired, had the idea. He said, people go to comedy clubs just to release just enough tension so that they can go back to their miserable existences. I'm not cynical. I'm not that cynical about it, but I see that what comedy potentially can do, and the kind that I like to do, is to create insight that awakens people, so that in the midst of the seriousness, they might see a higher way, a better way out. And I'll give you an example of what was perhaps one of the most transformational comedy moments in our history. And this happened in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And there were Americans and Soviets meeting to discuss the possible trade between the two countries. And when news of the missile crisis hit, everything stopped. There was tremendous tension in the room. And finally, one of the Soviet delegates, rather timidly, raised his hand and he said, I suggest we each go around and tell a joke. And he volunteered to start. His joke was, what's the difference between capitalism and communism? In capitalism, man exploits man. In communism, it's the other way around. And everybody in that room, there was a hesitation, and they all burst out laughing. And in that laughter, the tension was released, and they were able to continue their business because the joke busted the trends of separation. That beyond all of these isms, we're all human beings. All of these people were in fear that they might never see their families again. And that little joke brought them back into a common space, and they were able to continue with their meeting. So I look at comedy as a transformational act. It's like a magic trick, and if it's done right, you can open people's hearts and free their minds.
But comedy these days seems to be so vulgar.
Well, I think that's the kind of comedy that George Carlin was talking about, where people basically they want to get lubricated enough to laugh at ridiculous stuff and find the non-meaning in things. But all comedy, if it actually is funny, all comedy is pointing out contradictions, and you can do that. You can do that about anything. You can do it about sexual relationships. You can do it about body image. You can do it about politics, and I guess in comedy clubs, that's the kind of comedy people want to hear. That's why I don't do comedy clubs.
Yeah, that's why I don't go to them.
Yeah. Hey, that's why I didn't meet you at one.
There you go.
Neither of us were there. Right,
all right,
exactly.
Stand by. We've got to take our break. Exonation, Steve Behrman is our guest this hour. www.wakeuplaughing.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in beautiful Niagara, Ontario, Canada. Now, if you'd like to find out about the broadcast schedule we have for you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the X Zone TV channel on, let me see here, SimulTV, visit www.simultv.com, and in the search engine, just type in X Zone. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break. Don't go away. Steve Behrman is our special guest this hour. Exonation, www.wakeupLaughing.com. Several years ago, Steve, you wrote a book with, Bruce Lipton, Spontaneous Evolution. What's that book about, and is it pertinent in today's society?
Well, it's both pertinent and it's a bit impertinent, too. I met Bruce in 2005. He had just written a book called Biology of Belief, which is one of the been a bestseller for many years. And Biology of Belief talks about how our beliefs and perceptions impact our health, our lives, and the outpicturing of our lives and world. And Bruce and I began a conversation about what if we applied the ideas in Biology of Belief to society in general, to our collective beliefs. And the result is spontaneous evolution. And we have three sections of the book. The first is the what so section, the second is the so what, and the third is the now what. And in the what so section, we talk about how beliefs and perceptions change over time and how they are largely unconscious to us. I mean, a lot of things, that 95% of who we are and what we do is below the conscious level. And so often we'll read books and we'll go to a seminar, we want to change something in our lives, but because of the very deep prior programming, we're not able to make the change. And so this book talks about how to do that, and it also talks about how we've been, in a way, hoodwinked into accepting beliefs that are not quite true, that are obsolete, and then it points us in the direction of a healthy future, where we actually, we call it changing the guard and regrowing the garden. Changing the guard, meaning removing the century beliefs that are limiting to us and replacing them with visionary beliefs that'll bring about the world that we all know is possible. One of the things I can say about that is that as an evolutionary biologist, Bruce maintains that the next stage of human evolution, it doesn't have anything to do with artificial intelligence, but it has to do with real intelligence. And it has to do with recognizing that we're all cells in a superorganism called humanity. And that at a certain level of population, the structures in biology, the structures have to change. I mean, if you think about it, imagine that we were living in a hunter-gatherer society, and every morning 8 million New Yorkers would be trudging up to Westchester County to forage for food. At that kind of scale, that's a ridiculous way of organizing. And so at the scale that we are right now, the way that we have of organizing, which is me or you, dominate or be dominated, fundamentally how we humans are organizing right now, is the equivalent of autoimmune dysfunction in the body politic, in that healthy cells are destroying other healthy cells to the detriment of the whole system. So in recognizing that we're all cells on the same body, we see that everybody has a job, everybody has something that they do really well, everybody has a work of heart, and that as this is woven together, we find a more generative society than the one we have now. We withdraw our energy off the battlefield, and we get onto a different playing field. And again, this is an evolutionary imperative. It sounds like I'm a pie-in-the-sky ideal, but it really has to become a feet-on-the-ground real deal if we are to make it through this passage without destroying ourselves.
Well, don't we have to face reality head-on, face our dragons?
Well, exactly. Well, I think part of the reality that we have to face is both the awful truth and the awesome opportunity. And these have been called apocalyptic times. And what apocalypse means is the lifting of the veils. And so what we're seeing is that all of these secrets, all of these toxic secrets are being revealed. In the United States, we have a president who is, I call him America's balloon karma payment. He's representing all of the things that have been under the surface, and now they're on the surface. And part of the reality that we have to face are these shadow pieces that we've ignored and we've swept under the carpet. At the same time that those toxic things are being revealed, we're also being exposed to secrets that have been kept in protective custody for millennia, various spiritual paths, whether we're talking about shamanic paths, ancient Celtic paths, we're talking about Vedic medicine, Chinese medicine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have tremendous tools at our disposal right now to be able to heal ourselves energetically, to be able to tune in and have a one-on-one relationship with the all that is and not have to go through the filters of religion. So this is really a very exciting time, and people are at all different levels of understanding and evolution.
But wouldn't you agree that today's society is being inundated with way too much data, and that the amount of data that is being required to be processed by our brain is putting us into an overload situation 9 times out of 10? Absolutely.
We've got lots and lots of information. We call it conditioned truth decay. When you have so many ideas in your head, you don't know what's true, and you're overwhelmed with information. We have lots of information, too much. We have some knowledge, and what we are lacking, the thing we're lacking the most is wisdom. Wisdom is how we contextualize our knowledge and use our hearts to use our intelligence more intelligently. So we need a different context for looking at what's going on. And the evolutionary context that Bruce and I are putting forward in the book is that we need to shift from a me or you world to a me and you world, to recognizing that we're all cells in the same body, and that in gathering around the virtues and values that we have in common and our common purpose, we can isolate the sociopathogens in the body politic that have been ruling the roost by manipulating one against the other.
So basically, what you're talking about is a collective consciousness.
Yes, exactly. We have to become aware of the collective consciousness, and the irony is that the more we are connected with this collective consciousness, the more free we are. And I know that some people get this idea that, oh my God, we're all going to be one mind and all ruled by one idea. And that's the exact opposite of what we're talking about. We're talking about the most incredible diversity that we've ever had. And true minority rights, where each of us is a minority of one. We have the right to be exactly who we are, and all of that fits into this bigger picture, recognizing that we are actually at one with everyone and everything, and yet we are an individual vantage point for the universe to look at itself.
So basically, we're talking about the same tenets that are talked about in any religious philosophy. Exactly,
but what happens is what the dogma tends to overrule everything, and people get caught up in this in the trivia of it. Alan Watts said that most people prefer to worship the finger rather than noticing where the finger is pointing. So in every religion, it was founded on a significant experience and connection with the ineffable, and it loses something in the translation. Some wise guy said that spirituality is our connection with the divine, and religion is crowd control.
Well, I don't agree with that, but it's kind of a nice saying, I guess.
Yeah.
So what do you think, based on what you're saying, that religion is outdated?
I'm saying that religion needs to be updated. The original meaning of religion comes from the word religare, which means to bind. And the idea was that it was a connection that we had to this ineffable divine, the one spirit.
Right.
It's a connection that we have to other people, and it's a connection that we have to the web of life. And if we look at modern society, we're out of touch with all three. We don't have that individual connection to the divine. We don't have a sacred center in the middle of our civilization.
Well, wait a sec. Hold on here.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who have a direct connection with the divine of their own philosophy. I know people who claim to have a direct connection with God, a connection with Jesus.
Oh, absolutely.
And as far as the center, that's what they call the church, or the synagogue, or the mosque. So what are we saying here? I'm having a bit of a problem trying to get to the crux of the matter.
Okay, well, I'll uncrux it if I can.
Sure.
It is the church and the synagogue and the mosque and the place in nature, and it's where it includes and transcends religion and non-religion. So when people have that experience of connection, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But we don't have a common language that translates between all of these different systems.
We don't?
That are all going in the same way, all going in the same direction.
So what's wrong with individuality?
I think individuality is great.
So if we're not going all in the same direction, we're being individuals. What's wrong with that?
We're being individuals, and we each have our individual connection with whatever that is.
Yeah.
When we begin to recognize that the commonality of that connection, even though it's totally unique, as the Swami says, each of us is totally unique, just like everybody else. When we recognize that that total uniqueness that we have, and our unique way of relating to whatever that is.
All right, stand by. We've got to take our commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour. And Nation, Steve Behrman and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Nation, Steve Behrman is our guest this hour, www.wakeuplaughing.com. So, all right, help me understand this, that when we're talking about we're all part of the same, but, we can't be individuals because if we're individuals, we're not part of the same. I don't understand the
This is it's the perfect paradox. Just like comedy is a paradox, it's a perfect paradox. Both are true. We're absolute individuals. That's the whole point. Everybody is unique, and everybody has something that they're bringing to the game, and it's just a bigger game than what we've imagined until now. So there's no kind of control from the top down. It's simply recognizing from the bottom up that when we work together, things work better.
Okay, so how do we accomplish that? Because that'll never happen. Everybody is too individualistic. Everybody has their own beliefs. Everybody has their own way of doing things. At the end of the day, does it really matter?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if we look at human history, we're just a little dot in human history right now.
Yeah.
And so our little civilization here, that and the individualism that you're talking about, is pretty new. It's pretty new. It's if we see what since World War II, we've become much more focused on individual fulfillment and so on. And what's happened is that there are other things that have fallen apart. We've woven ourselves outside the web of life in a lot of different ways, and money has become the main motivation. And there's been nothing actually that's superseded that. in the old days, and when there was more community, when there was, let's say, the church at the center of town, the center of the community, then there was a lot more of this recognition of how we are connected. And everything to an extreme is toxic. So, I mean, if you look at collectivism to the extreme, we've seen how toxic that can be. And individualism to the extreme, we see that everybody is pulling in different directions and the center doesn't hold. So it's really a matter of balance. And I think if we want to look at where the balance comes from, it ultimately comes from each individual. It comes from individuals having that realization of what their own connection is, what their own purpose is, and recognizing that if this is woven into a greater purpose, then things work better. We've had this one of the beliefs that we debunk as one of our misperceptions in the book is the Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest. It's not exactly right. It's really the non-survival of the non-fittest. The predator animal is not looking to track down the fastest gazelle, so the lion could put that gazelle in his den, the gazelle head in his den. It's actually the weakest animal. So it's not really the survival of the fittest. And what we find in most ecosystems, that it's the thrival of the fittingest, that those entities that fit into the environment, that are in harmony with the environment, that create rebalance in the environment, those are the ones that thrive. And if we're looking at the various crises that our species is going through right now, it certainly looks like the Earth is trying to kick us off the planet.
But isn't that just a part of evolution, what we're going through now?
Well, it's part of evolution, but we have the consciousness. We don't know what other beings existed before we did, but we do know that if we look at the evolution of the single cell to the multi-cell organism, and multi-cell organisms developing into very complex organisms like you or I, we have 50 trillion cells. If we see that, we are the first stage where we actually have consciousness and that we can make choices about what we do. And we can make a choice to, the simplest choice is what we are doing. Is it feeding love, or is it feeding fear? Are we bringing things toward a healing direction, or are we pushing things apart? And often that pushing apart, when people are inundated with fear, particularly fear of the other, whoever that other might be, then they're leveraged into doing things that they wouldn't do otherwise. So what we have right now is a political system where each side is pumping its own brand of fear into its people, and creating a sense of disconnection with the other side, dehumanizing the other side.
But this is nothing new. This is how the political arenas have conducted business for years and years and years. The only reason why it is so popular these days is because of the internet and the amount of information that is accessible to people. Well,
it's been that way, but you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. In other words, things change over time. And what's happening right now, particularly with the crises that we're facing in terms of our own civilization, in terms of overpopulation, climate, all of these things, the oceans, et cetera, that requires a different level of organization. And it doesn't have to be, in fact, it can't be an externally imposed big daddy, big brother, which is looks like where we're heading. We're heading toward that kind of totalitarian that view. It's happening on both sides. It's happening in the current administration in the USA, and it's also happening where the other side, the Democratic side, are trying to shut down people who are saying, maybe those vaccinations aren't safe after all.
But once again, that's a matter of choice whether you want to get vaccinated or you don't, or if you want to get an abortion or not. I'm not pro-abortion whatsoever. Believe me, I am totally for the right to life, people.
But the point is that when something becomes the law, like it is in California now, vaccinations are mandatory in California.
Well, vaccinations are mandatory here in Canada too. Big deal.
Well,
big deal. So what? If you want to go to school, you have to have your child vaccinated. Okay, fine. I'll go with the flow. All my kids have been vaccinated, and all 6 of them, and all our grandchildren have been vaccinated. My wife's a medical professional, and she believes in the vaccination. So what's the problem?
Well, the problem is that there are vaccinations that are not safe, and that there have been studies that have been run by the medical industry that have repressed information on that.
Well, there's conspiracy in everything, and a study is only as good as the people who do it. And in order to take validity of any study, you have to understand the motives behind the person who is making a study against a study, who's making a study against it. It's a never-ending circle.
Yeah, it's a never-ending circle, and the thing is that at this point, we may be coming to a point where things are spinning in such a direction that there's an actual center that we just don't have, and the ways that we have of organizing ourselves at this point seem to be outdated and need an upgrade.
Such as?
Well, for example, the way that, I don't know how your government is working up there, but I think that here we basically have corporations and the mainstream media pretty much controlling everything and determining what the parameters of discussion and debate are.
Well, when it comes to the media and how people perceive it, there's a very simple solution. If you don't agree with what the media is doing, don't read the newspaper that is either right-winged or left-winged. If you've got a right-wing or a left-wing TV channel on, you don't want to watch it, shut it off. Same thing goes for the radio.
Well, that's a good recipe for not getting upset. But the point is that, sometimes if we ignore things, if we ignore a condition, it gets worse. And so I think we've had that where people have tuned out certain things. Well, I don't want to look at it. Yeah. I don't believe that, so I don't want to look at it. But nonetheless, it makes a difference in how the external society is working.
The only time it makes a difference is when the person actually gets off their butt and goes and votes. There's a lot of armchair politicians out there, and these are the people who refuse to run for office. These are the people who refuse to go to rallies. These are the people who refuse to sign petitions. These are the people who would rather sit on their butts, drink their beer, and just talk a mean game and absolutely do nothing about it.
Well, I think that the internet has certainly facilitated that.
Well, of course it has.
Facilitated people simply slinging insults at one another.
Yep.
And and that's part of the polarization, because it's mostly fighting straw men. You're creating straw men that don't really exist on the other side, and then fighting that. And so what I'm saying is that there's a lot of energy that's wasted on that battlefield that could be better used.
I agree with you. Stand by. We've got to take our final break. In X Zone Nation, Steve Behrman is our guest. www.wakeuplaughing.com. And let me see. So many things to talk about these days here in the X Zone. Well, listen, why don't you go to www.xzbn.net. Check out some of the great programming we have available for you, 7/24, 365. And also the X Zone TV channel, 7/24, 365 on Simul TV. I'm Rob McConnell. Steve Behrman and I will be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. Steve Behrman is our guest this hour, www.wakeuplaughing.com. Steve, I understand that you were a political science major, and taking a look at the political scene as well as we touched very slightly on the media, but when it comes to fake news, what's your take on it?
Well, I think that it's true. I did major in political science, although I never got quite so far as to dissect a politician. Never quite got there. And there's two principles of political science that stick with me. First principle is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the other one is divide and conquer. That's been how how societies have been managed for a long time. So what we're seeing right now with this quote-unquote fake news, we're seeing two trends. First trend is that the mainstream media has very selectively chosen what it broadcasts. So as an example, in the States, when the Iraq War started, those people who were slightly against the war, they simply were taken off the air. Their point of view is not allowed to be aired. Now, the reason why that's important is because, as we found out, there weren't any weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
It's simply weapons of mass distraction. And because people were not really given the full picture by the mainstream media, they saw that it was essentially a state lie that was carried out by the media. So what's happened over the many, many years is that there's been growing distrust in mainstream media. So if somebody wanted to really create havoc in a society, what they would do is they would make sure that nobody really knew what was true. Nobody really knew what's true news and what's not true news. And what we've been seeing in this past election cycle, 2016, the group from the UK, Cambridge Analytics, what they basically did was they kept feeding people the kind of information that they knew would reinforce what they believed, and created these, in fact, a lot of these false memes that people kind of took in. And I know a lot of people who fell for a lot of these very strange narratives, because whoever was perpetrating those narratives knew how to get inside their heads.
Well, didn't that backfire on the Clinton people? Because by using all the Cambridge Analytics and all the crooked ways that the Clintons operate, it backfired. Trump got in with
it was done by Trump. It was done by Trump. That's who benefited by it. And I think that.
Wait a sec. Hold on here. Let's go back here for a second.
Yeah.
So you're saying that Cambridge Analytics was hired by Trump?
Absolutely. Those are the people who hired Cambridge Analytics. They were the ones that actually created all of these bots and memes to discredit Hillary.
Oh, she didn't need
help
there.
Believe me, she was no. My own personal opinion about her is very unfavorable. I think that they worked against Bernie Sanders. They did some very nefarious things. But ultimately, it was the Trump people, Steve Bannon and so on,
right,
who used that system against Hillary. And in our political system, unfortunately, in this country, we had probably the two most unpopular candidates ever. We had the neocon and the Genghis Khan, and they both were con artists. And so we chose what people thought was the lesser evil. But people were greatly manipulated. There's a professor at Harvard, I think her name is Zuboff, and she did a very extensive study. In fact, there's a little documentary about it, Zuboff, and she talked about exactly how that was used by the people who were working for the Trump the Trump campaign, and that's really what turned the election. It created a lot of these memes like Pizzagate and so on, which were something that has a kernel of truth, but is exaggerated and then is distorted, and people fell for these things and went down the rabbit hole with those things. I've got friends who went for those theories and are still doing it. Every day they're sitting waiting for the next installment, saying that exposure of these people is imminent. It's imminent. And of course it never happens because it's a game that's designed to keep them occupied. There's people go, well, there's the QAnon people who believe that that Donald Trump is secretly working with the deep state to save America, and that he's just pretending to be what he looks like out there. And I've been around for a long time, and I know BS when I see it. It's very Orwellian. If you can tell people that up is down and down is up, which is what's been happening, people go, well, I don't care. I've heard somebody say, well, I don't care if I don't care if it's true. I don't believe it. So people are much more when there is when there is fear that is put into the system.
Something that I find rather strange, is that looking at the outside, I think that President Trump is doing everything that he said he would do, including, draining the swamp. And I think what has really upset the Washington status quo is that here you have somebody who wasn't politically in the political circles who got elected president. And what this shows me is that the system really does work, because the country is a business. That's why you have a president. That's why you have a vice president. And that's why you have secretaries of all the different divisions. In order to run the country successfully, it took a business person like Donald Trump. Unemployment is down. Industry's coming back to the United States.
He's not a business person. He's a con man.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so.
He's running the country like a crime boss would do it. I'm going to pardon my friends. I'm going to pardon all these criminals. And by the way, if you cross me, I'm going to prosecute you. It's personal. It's personal. And I think that the people who...
But he's getting the job done. He's getting the job done.
He's getting the wrong job done.
Oh, I don't think if you ask... I don't think that if you would ask anybody who has been hired because of the number of jobs that he's brought back to the United States, or the jobs that have been created, the economy that is growing, the stock market that has gone up. To me, that shows that he's doing the right thing.
Well, he's doing the right thing on one level, but not on the other level.
Well, what's the other level?
He's not doing the right thing in regards to the environment. He's not doing the right thing in regards to the actual rule of law. He's not doing that. He's a law unto himself. And that this country is not a business. It's not.
Sure it is. Oh, it's a business. Of course it is. Any country, how can you say it's not a business without an economy? And an economy is based on business.
An economy is based on a lot of things. An economy is based on what is valuable to create in the first place. So when you're creating jobs, you want to create jobs that are actually valuable, that are actually doing something that's of benefit to people.
Well, what jobs has he created that's not a benefit?
What jobs has he created? I'm just curious. He's created jobs perhaps in the oil industry. Has he created jobs in the oil industry? What jobs has he created?
Well, then if jobs aren't being created, Steve, why are the employment numbers down instead of up?
Because there are people who are homeless and not even looking for a job. 40% of people in America are paycheck to paycheck, and many of them without the paycheck. Many of them without the paycheck. And people are just, they're falling by the wayside and giving up. And so...
Well, we've got an increase in homeless people here in Canada as well. So, and the sad part is the number of veterans that are homeless. And, when you look around the world, you've got so many other countries where the employment rate is much higher. The homelessness rate is much higher. The educational fallacies and the failing of the educational field is down. Jobs are down. So when you look at the United States and Canada, man, we're lucky.
Well, of course, we've always been at the top of the food chain. That's certainly true. But we're becoming, in this country, and you're over there on the other side, in this country, we're becoming more and more like a third world country. And that's and in terms of our education, in terms of our healthcare system, which is given the amount of money that is poured into the healthcare system, and given our rank in the world, it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. We are a country that has been taken over by the power of money, for the power of money, and we don't know what to do about it.
All right, Steve, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more information about Steve Behrman, visit his website, wakeuplaughing.com. Wow. I didn't find him funny, did you guys? What do I know, right? I'm a realist. Wake up laughing. I'm not laughing. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Niagara, Ontario, Canada. And by the way, I fully support President Trump and what he's doing. Don't go away.